Genesis 5, from Adam to Noah. This is the written account of Adam's family line. When God created mankind, he made them in the likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them, and he named them mankind when they were created. Note on the word mankind says mankind and Adam translate the same Hebrew word, Adam, or Adam. So it's just a word that somebody else picked for an earlier word, which was Adam's name. Again, the way the translation has gotten away from the central message of Genesis that Adam and Eve were created equal in Eden. When Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Adam lived a total of 930 years, and then he died. And this is one of those things where people say, well, this couldn't be real because people didn't live that long. The note says that the three kings listed in the Sumerian king list as ruling before the flood have reigns that add up to 72,000 years. But that's another one of those things where people are basing that conclusion on what happens now, or what apparently happens now, which is that people live this period of time and then they die. And on the admittedly reasonable conclusion that that's always what's happened, and that the other primates tend to have, somewhat similar lifespan, and even our lifespan is considerably longer than what we know from periods of written history where people lived, maybe 30, 40 years, and that was their expected life. But that's saying that that's all that's possible, and that's a very limited view, even scientifically speaking, because as many people have found recently, there's these genetic structures that count down a clock towards death from old age, if disease doesn't get you first, but that's not necessarily how things have to be, and that there may be some ways to unwind these structures, and a lot of this is, quackery, selling herbs and so forth. That's not real, but the theory is the same, that the decay of the human organism is not necessarily determined by physics. It's just the way we happen to be, but it's not necessarily the way we have to be. And that there may be some advanced science, even in the universe, millions of years advanced beyond our own, that can simply make that unnecessary. And why not? I mean, it's all just energy and matter in this body in a very complex organization. Suppose you were a cosmic being that created the universe, had the will to move energy on a very minute scale and a very large scale to manipulate matter, space, and time. Well, why couldn't such a being extend the lifespans of what creatures would otherwise live to be? Why not? Again, it's something's drawing a conclusion from what we perceive in our everyday lives now, but that presupposes that our everyday lives now are the measure of all that ever could be in a universe that is billions of years old and larger than anyone can possibly imagine or even see. And when you look at it in that perspective, it seems completely ridiculous to say that living creatures could not, such as us, could not possibly live longer than 100, 120 years. But that, and also, so there's the scientific misconception there where, logically speaking, we're drawing a conclusion based on a very small amount of data that doesn't necessarily determine in a rational way what might be possible given the rules of the universe. And then the other theological fallacy there is to place limits on the power of God and to say that because our perception is so limited, and these are the things that we learn on a daily basis. You live, you're born, you live, you die in a space of a blink of an eye. And that's the way it is, and that's the way it's always going to be. No, that's placing limits on God. And that is the whole point. That is the radical idea of the Bible, is that the things we perceive on a daily basis and the conclusions one might draw from that based on the observations of humanity and the animal kingdom as we perceive them are not necessarily limits. Why doesn't God just make us all immortal? I don't know. I mean, why? The whole message of the whole thing is that, that he does, if you want. And also that even your death is not the barrier to life. And to really wrap your head around that results in some interesting conclusions. And why not? I mean, so 72,000 years, that would be, a good portion of the Ice Age. Okay. And then the flood happening, probably at the end of the Lesser Dryas. I don't know. Or at the end of the Ice Age. Maybe it was the end of the Ice Age, and then there was some history lost. When Seth had lived 105 years, he became the father of Enosh. After he became the father of Enosh, Seth lived 807 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Seth lived a total of 912 years, and then he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he became the father of Canaan. After he became the father of Canaan, Enosh lived 815 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enosh lived a total of 905 years, and then he died. When Canaan had lived 70 years, he became the father of Mahalalel. After he became the father of Mahalalel, Canaan lived 840 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Canaan lived a total of 910 years, and then he died. When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he became the father of Jared. After he became the father of Jared, Mahalalel lived 830 years and then had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Mahalalel lived a total of 895 years, and then he died. When Jared had lived 862 years, he became the father of Enoch. After he became the father of Enoch, Jared lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Jared lived a total of 962 years, and then he died. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived a total of 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more because God took him away. And that's an interesting variation on the repetition of this history. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. After he became the father of Lamech, Methuselah lived to 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Methuselah lived a total of 969 years, and then he died. When Lamech lived 882 years, he had a son. He named him Noah and said, "He will comfort us in the labor and painful toil of our hands caused by the ground the Lord has cursed." After Noah was born, Lamech lived 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Lamech lived a total of 777 years, and then he died. After Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So about Enoch. So this idea that he was taken away, not that he died, it doesn't say he died. God took him away. Like that, like he was the first of the resurrected, or perhaps he was the first who didn't die. It's interesting to stick that little bit in there. But the whole point of this, I mean, wait a minute. Didn't Enoch? Oh no, that was Enosh. So that I think is, it's these ancient histories, these the list is actually on a stone tablet here. The Sumerian king list. The Sumerian king list is this tablet giving rulers from before the flood, inscribed in cuneiform, which has a similar thing, not the same people. I don't know. Maybe it was their competition version. The whole point being, I think that we don't know, and as long as we're willing to live with the possibility that this might be true, or if not exactly true, somewhat true, that with the direct power of the presence of God in their lives were extended beyond what we would perceive as naturally possible, based on our experience. Of course, this brings up a whole other can of worms. Why does God abandon children with cancer? And maybe he doesn't. Maybe it just doesn't at this point in the way that God deals with us. Maybe it just doesn't matter if we die. Maybe the sum total of life is so far it so far outweighs the few years of pain and suffering that we have before our first deaths, that it even when we get there, we're just like, oh, okay, well, that's the way things were when we were like that, but now it doesn't matter because we can go on, God willing.